Penn State got two commits this week, one from the class of 2027 and another from the 28 class. NLWC clean house at Final X as expected, and Gavin McKenna is less than a week away from officially becoming a Toronto Maple Leaf. We'll cover it all on this episode of Joe and the Fatman. Joe Smeltzer, Nittany Sports Now, joined as always by Kyle Fatman Golik, also in Nittany Sports Now. And Fatman, let's start by talking about the two commits. We'll start with Case Alexander. The guy who is going to be probably the more publicized one of these two commits, Alexander, a linebacker, four-star from Washington High School in Oklahoma. His brother Cooper, that's why I almost called him Cooper, is a tight end for Penn State who came over with Matt Campbell from Iowa State. And his dad, Steven Alexander, was a star tight end at Oklahoma, ended up having a 10-year career in the NFL and even made a Pro Bowl with the Washington Redskins in 2000. So, Kyle, Oklahoma was in on Case Alexander. This wasn't a case of the local school ignoring a local talent. He had officially visited OU June 13th, so pretty recently. Yet Penn State ended up winning out in Alexander's recruitment, given it probably helped that his brother is there. But an Oklahoma kid picking Penn State over his father's alma mater, that's something we're not really used to talking about, are we?
We are not. And really, if we think of recruiting as a whole nationally, everything that we grew up with and everything that we know has been tossed out the window. You look at some of the kids in Pennsylvania, you would have thought years ago it would have been a foregone conclusion. Penn State has a new elite coach. There'd be that momentum. That doesn't happen to be the case. And it's very similar down in Oklahoma here. It's nothing against Brent Venables. He's a hell of a defensive coach, has the reputation of the linebackers he had coached, whether he was a defensive coordinator at Oklahoma under Bob Stoops or when he was under Dabo Swinney winning national championships at Clemson. Ultimately, it comes down to familiarity. And look, Cooper Alexander was seeing everything Matt Campbell was doing firsthand, and it's something to build on. It can be frustrating for the fans out there where, hey, we lose on a Jameer Dean, maybe not as doing as well in Pennsylvania. But when you look at a recruitment like this, where, hey, all the chips are lined up for Campbell, it just needs to get across the finish line. This one did. And to me, Joe, this was a commitment in my mind that's something Penn State can build on, especially under the Campbell regime. I know Oklahoma is not a familiar recruiting territory for the Nittany Lions, but you got to take a look at it from a bigger picture. When Campbell has his influence, when people know his system and they have the relationship, a program like Oklahoma couldn't unseat a kid for, in the case of Case Alexander, when they had home field advantage.
Yeah, so let's talk about Alexander as a player. Obviously he's being recruited as a linebacker, but the guy can play offense too. Had about 700 yards receiving last year and 12 touchdowns. So, 6'3", 215. He's going to have to put on a few pounds, to say the least, probably to be a D1 tight end. But given the family pedigree at that position and given Penn State's knack for developing tight ends, is that something that could be in the future if linebacker, for whatever reason, doesn't work out?
Always. Anything is open to anybody. Wasn't Tyler Warren or one of the tight ends recently supposed to be slated for defense and then came back to offense and flourished?
Yeah, Luke Reynolds was a quarterback and Tyler Warren was a quarterback. So
that could very well be it. Just hard to remember that stuff, but you look at it, you just see, he has that great ability, great sense of the ball at the linebacker. When you watch the high school tapes, when you watch the season highlights, effective on both sides of the ball. But I really, really see a linebacker unless he really wants to turn it around. It wouldn't hurt Penn State if he became a tight end, but I really see a kid that has a nose for the ball, can read offenses, can make a great instinctive first read, has an amazing first step, great in coverage, has the soft hands to be a difference maker whenever there's passes over the middle that can make a key turnover. I mean, Penn State fans, all you got to do is look back at the first college football playoff game ever, and 2 linebackers made pick sixes. I mean, this is the kind of playmaking ability Alexander has. So I really think he's going to be a linebacker, Joe. But again, plenty of time between now and then the day of reckoning, as we would say, of where he will be at.
Yeah, talking about the second player. Well, he was the first player that committed before Alexander, but he's a little further down the line. I'm in the 2028 class. That's Carter Petrie, a kicker from Buffalo, New York, St. Joseph's. Kickers aren't ranked the way other positions are on 24/7. So it's kind of hard to go off based on rankings. But Penn State has had a pretty solid special teams tradition over recent years with Stacy Collins and then Joe Lord before that. And now Justin Lustig has built a pretty solid reputation. And you think about the last great Penn State season, which was in 2024. One of the signature wins of that season was against USC. And looking at that win in overtime, USC's kicker missed the field goal. Ryan Barker nailed his field goal. And Barker was one of the bright spots in last year's season, which ended up being chaotic, developed into one of the best, maybe the best kicker in college football. So I think this is a guy, Petrie, that a lot of people are going to kind of look over and, dismiss because of where he plays. But I think that's a little unfair. Having a good kicker is something that could beat a difference in a season being a great one versus a mediocre one. Because we talked about last week, Kyle, the margin for error in college football is so small compared to other sports.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying about kickers, ask Ohio State how they feel about Jaden Fielding as a kicker and what kicks he had missed that were in big situations that maybe would have made Ohio State seasons more plentiful, more bountiful, more successful. And look, the Buckeyes hit the portal for Connor Hawkins, who's most likely going to be the starting kicker. You want to be solid on special teams, and I know Coach Lustig will always say this here: special teams, when it's good, you never hear about it. I mean, even me, who wanted to really get an opportunity during last local media day to get to know our special teams, didn't have the time. I mean, you have so much priority between offense and defense, it's hard to get down there. But when your special teams is an Achilles heel, it doesn't hide itself. I mean, I think a lot of Penn State fans and really football fans in general, when you look at like soup to nuts here, Joe, the mechanics on a field goal kick, how automatic that is, punt situations, punt coverage. There's so much that goes along with this that you often overlook it. I think this is a big get. Anytime you can get an elite specialist, especially as a kicker, you take it all day, because take a look at what happened in 24. When Penn State was mired in a little bit of a kicking controversy, eventually settling in on Ryan Barker. If they didn't have that kicking depth, Penn State loses that USC game. They may have lost at other games had field goals not been made. That's why you can't just be like, oh, it's a kicker. Kickers come up big in big situations. They're typically, them when it happens and when you need them. So I think it's a big get. It's definitely a good sign that Penn State's going to always be gunning for top specialists in the Campbell era, and it's a great get for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, ask any Ohio State fan how important it would be to have a good kicker. They would probably have an extra Big Ten championship. But moving on to Penn State wrestling, Final X was held over the weekend on a Friday night in Newark, New Jersey. NLWC, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, had 6 representatives, and 5 of them won their 2 matches to make it to the world team. Those being Kyle Stake and Snyder, Marcus Blaze, who is going into his sophomore season, still wrestling for Penn State. Luke Lillidahl did not make it. He lost to Spencer Lee in straight matches. But five wrestlers from Penn State and NLWC are going to Final X, and this really shouldn't be much of a surprise. Levi Haynes and Zane Rutherford being the other two now graduated from Penn State, but half of the world team for Team USA is going to be a Penn State guy or an NLWC guy. And even though that's not really anything unexpected at this point, hasn't been anything unexpected for a long time, it's still pretty darn good.
Yeah, what Final X was just a reminder of for the folks is the center of gravity of American freestyle wrestling runs through State College. And when you really think about the dynasty that Cale Sanderson has built, when we were up at the Blue White practice, friend of the show, Zach Seiko, who does a great job at also covering Penn State wrestling, the point he made to, I know at least me, and I think Joe, you're within vicinity of this, is why Penn State's kind of hard to crack at the armor is Cale's not just pitching the 3 or 4 years wrestling at the NCAA level. He's talking US Open, he's talking Final X, he's talking World Championships, and dare he say anything about the Olympics. And this was a reminder, that Penn State, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, this is where you want to be if you want to achieve these goals. Even though Lillidahl got beat by Lee, and look, anyone who's covered Spencer Lee knows for a guy Lee's size who's freakishly strong and has the ability to turn it on, Lee was motivated, and you saw that in both matches because Lee just dominated Lillidahl 7-1 and 8-4. I think the match of the night, to me, two big things came out of from the five that got in. I think Marcus Blaze has kind of fortified himself. Like, I can't imagine at this point, because one of the talking points that, I've heard, I think you've been on, I've heard guys like Christian Piles, Justin Bash, Seiko, all of them talk about, could Marcus Blaze take a red shirt? And he could, but I think with a lot of the momentum that he has, I can't imagine him not being in the lineup next year. And his wins over Jax Forrest were huge. And, grant you, the opening match he won on criteria, but the second match he really started to assert himself. And then really the avalanche came in the winner take all about winning 5-2. The other component of it is I look at a guy like Levi Haynes, who just completed his college time, Joe, and this guy's looking like he's ready for the big time. I don't know how far he's going to go in Worlds. I don't know what beyond this is, but this kid has an extremely bright future. And look, he may have had the absolute cleanest performance by any wrestler of the night. He just swept Chance Marsteller. He just took care of business, and it was great. And look, for all the superlatives that you can give guys like Zane Rutherford and Kyle Dake, and Kyle Snyder even too. I mean, with Rutherford, it was classic Zane. And for those of us who have been blessed to watch him over the years, the first bout was a very disciplined Zane bout where he's incredibly hard to score on. And then when it was time for him to kind of separate when the bout depending on it in the second one, he just showed up and dominated 8-2. I mean, that's classic Zane Rutherford, Joe. And then Kyle Dake, I don't know how many other superlatives.
Amazing.
Yeah. How many different weight classes between the NCAAs, between the, in his post-collegiate career that he's done. I look at this, Joe, and this was a statement for Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, a big statement.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about Kyle Dake specifically because I think that's the story of this whole thing, and it's a guy that Penn State fans might not be as attached to, and that's nothing personal against Kyle Dake. It's just that he didn't wrestle at Penn State. He's a Cornell guy that now trains at Penn State. So Penn State fans, I'm sure a lot of them remember watching him at Cornell, but it's not the same as following these other guys for all those years at Penn State and the Nittany Lion singlet. But looking at what Kyle Dake has done, he's the only wrestler in college history to win 4 national titles of 4 different weight classes: 41, 49, 57, and 65. That's just absurd. And now he has qualified for the world team at 3 different weight classes. He is a 4-time world champion, winning 2 at 74 and 2 at 79. And now he's going to be competing again at 86 if he can win another world title at 3 different weight classes. I don't know how much that's been done, but it can't be something that's very frequent. And a big thing that people are going to be wondering over the past few years, going back to when I had my exclusive with Kyle Dake when RAF was coming to State College, he doesn't sound like he has any plans to hang it up. And, when you are at Kyle Dake's age, he is going to be 37 years old by the time the next Olympic trials roll around. But it sounds like he's going to be going at it. And who are we to say that he won't be the USA's representative at his class in the next Olympic Games in LA?
Yeah, the only thing really missing, if I'm not mistaken, Joe, from Kyle Dake's resume is an Olympic gold medal. He has 2 bronze medals to my knowledge. The guy is a phenomenon. And again, I remember when I was covering the Big Ten wrestling championships that were up in State College, and I remember sending you pictures, Joe, and I'm like, I took a picture of Kyle Dake. I'm like, who's that? And you're like, oh, that's Kyle Dake. That's a badass over there. I'm like, I went over and said hello to him. I mean, I made sure of that because the name resonated with me once. Anyway, it's like sometimes with wrestlers, if you're not used to seeing them, you don't know who they are, and that was in my case. That was my rookie moment there. I'm not ashamed or embarrassed to say that, but I just think where Penn State wrestling is it's hard to it's really hard to, and I understand at some point I'll probably write another Penn State Oklahoma State article. I know you probably will, Joe, but when you really think of the grand scheme of things, Joe, it's like I don't see Oklahoma State at this level. When you look at the full scope of it, the way Seiko mapped it out for at least me. I mean, you probably know this stuff. But for me to understand the gravity of understanding post-career in wrestling clubs with the Open and X and Worlds and the Olympics, that's a big deal there. And I have a hard time seeing anyone crack in Penn State for a while on that. And Joe, I got to ask this question. And I saw this, and I kind of wanted to see what your take was. Again, another friend of the show, Christian Piles, was mentioning about, why Mitchell Messenbrink didn't compete in this. He obviously earned time off, but is it potentially, I really look at Mitchell. He reminds me a lot of, and I know this is a very, very old analogy, but there's going to be someone in our audience that will appreciate it. There's the Mike Reed vibes, where Mike Reed was more than just amazing football talent. He was a great musician, and Mitchell always talks about his music. Are we potentially seeing, is wrestling going to be sunsetting for Mitchell after next year, and maybe him go on? Is it a break? It's something to look into. That was something that was brought up, and I thought that was an interesting query. So I go back to you, Joe. What do you make of Messenbrink maybe not competing like guys like Marcus Blaze and Luke Lillendahl just did?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it was, as you mentioned, he just won some time off. It's a grind, doing this stuff all year round. And Messenbrink has no rush as far as getting to the world teams go. The Olympic trials are in 2 years. I doubt he's going to take time off there. But the worlds are always going to be there after he's done with college. I think when he's done this year, obviously he's going to be able to focus on freestyle all the live long day. So I just think he simply wanted time off as far as music goes. sports, yeah, that's something he takes very seriously. So, yeah, and Mike Reed won a Grammy, so that's something. I don't want to put that type of pressure on Mitchell, although I would certainly be pulling for him to win any Grammys if that's what he desires. But yeah, I think it's simply a matter of it's he was wrestling a lot, and he just wanted a break.
So let me ask you this one, because this was another thing I saw, and I think this was from Justin Bash. So I'm trying to make sure I properly attribute what I saw. If Messenbrink somehow moves up in weight or Levi Haynes moves down, etc., if those two are competing for a spot, who do you like in freestyle? Because they both have very distinct styles. Messenbrink just seems to be very offensive, and Levi's kind of like a chameleon in the squared circle, as they would say. So, who do you
That's
like?
tough.
Who are you? Joe's hating me right now.
Maybe Levi just because of the experience factor. He was one match away from winning a senior world championship last year, so I guess I'd give the edge based on that. But it could. I don't want to bet against Mitchell Messenbrink either. And a PJ Duke Mitchell Messenbrink freestyle clash is also inevitable. So
Yeah, that's good. That's going to be somewhat epic here, and I think in the next 2-3 years, as these guys advance into the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, which we all hope they do, it's just only going to make it even stronger as guys like Zane Rutherford and Kyle Dake and Kyle Snyder start to age out. There's no signs of that slowing down.
not at all. And speaking of not slowing down, you won't be slowing down, Fatman, because you're going to the NHL draft over the weekend, where Gavin McKenna is going to become a Toronto Maple Leaf. We can safely say that, and it's just a matter for you of choosing: do you want to be in Buffalo for the physical draft, or do you want to be in Toronto? Talking to McKenna at his introductory press conference. So, do you know, are they going to have McKenna in person? Because I know the NFL, they have those
Yes.
conference calls with the picks. So he will be in person?
Yes. Because what they do at the draft, Joe, is they have and this is the NHL's way of copying Hollywood or the Met Gala. They have the red carpet, and the fans are welcome to be there and watch them get introduced and walk in via the red carpet. So they'll be dressed to the nines and all the above. And like I said, I'm going to bust this out here. I mean, this is going to be hung up. I mean, obviously this is my magazine, but there's, somewhere at the Pegula Ice Arena, that's going to be plastered somewhere. I mean, this is about as big as it gets for Penn State hockey. The arguably the most important hockey periodical, probably outlet. I mean, I'm not trying to put us down, but it's like the hockey news is all in all the hockey news. And you got Gavin McKenna in a Penn State jersey ahead of a draft preview. That's about as big as it's going to get. And I mean, but it should be a foregone conclusion for Toronto to make the kid from the Yukon. I believe he's from Whitehorse at this point. I should know this right off the top of my head, but we're all human, and it really should be McKenna there. I mean, even though the Maple Leafs love the top Swedish players, I mean, Bård Salming and Matt Sundin ring a bell there, but I can't imagine them doing it, and it should be a historic night for Penn State hockey. I know Joe knows this. I'm working on trying to get someone from Penn State hockey. They said they're going to try to get me somebody, so stay tuned over the weekend. We'll have something either on Nittany Sports Now or on the YouTube channel with me talking with someone from Penn State hockey. I'm hoping for Guy Godowski. That may not come to fruition. I will take anybody, Joe. We are not bashful here at Nittany Sports Now. You give us something, we'll be happy with it, and we will get it what you can for the audience. I mean, between you talking with Campbell, Ryan Wilt, with a lot of the Penn State basketball legends, again, guys, premium content. There's no paywall. We're not Landon Tangwell, mocking stuff. We're literally free. There's no paywall, and you're getting as close to the action as we are. So we bring you along for the journey. We're going to try to I'm going to try to get as much behind the scenes. I'm trying to prepare more ahead of time. So that way I'm trying to create some sort of custom content, kind a little bit there just to kind of give people the feel and the scene of the NHL draft. That'd be, I think, a nice thing for our YouTube channel. Don't want to overpromise and underdeliver there, but you never know what it's going to bring. And like I said, Penn State has two more commits that should be drafted over the weekend, and Pierce Bowie and Jackson Cover. So it should be a monumental weekend for Penn State. Just stick around here at Nittany Sports now. We're going to try to give you the best, as close to it, and give you really good original content from the draft in Buffalo. And hopefully we get up into Toronto to be there for Gavin McKenna's first presser as a pro. So
Yes, they're talking about we've talked about this before, but obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think, are among sports' most unique franchises in that they haven't won any championships since 1967, but they're hated. They are probably to hockey, what the Yankees are to baseball, what the Cowboys are to football, what teams like Alabama are to the college game, but they haven't won nearly as much as any of those teams. And the reason that people don't like the Leafs is because of the way their fans act. Gavin McKenna's been in the public spotlight for a long time. He had to grow up a lot this season, some of them for natural reasons, others for off the ice stuff that has been talked about ad nauseum. But getting down to it, Fatman, how do you think Gavin McKenna is equipped to handle the Toronto fans and the Toronto media? Because we've seen this city run pretty good hockey players, Phil Kessel, Mitch Marner, out of town.
It's hard. It's all he's as prepared as one can be to go into a situation as you described. I mean, he's been in the hockey eye since he was 12 or younger, and he's grown up with, in front of a camera, media attention through his pee wee days, junior days, even throughout Penn State. I mean, I can attest to that part. He is by far and away the biggest name there with the combine. He attracted the biggest attention. It's, in my mind, it's really going to come down to that mental toughness. And look, if anyone who knows McKenna's story and knows his grandfather, who is a Canadian Indigenous people up in Canada, and what they went through as Canada was dealing with their versions. I'm not trying to get into, the stuff there, but, there was issues between the Indigenous peoples and where they had to go to kind of like a reform school, and they were being taught to how to be a Canadian, how to be a person, and how emasculating it was. I mean, one of the more emotional stuff from the McKenna documentary. And McKenna attributes his toughness to his family and to his grandfather especially. So I don't think it's going to break him, but I think it's going to be like what happens with a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs. When you talk Phil Kessel, when you talk Mitch Marner, and countless folks beforehand, it's how much patience do you have? What are your goals? It's like when you look at McDavid in Edmonton. McDavid's already a Hall of Famer, and you can put him up there with anyone all time. His resume is as complete as one can be, minus the Stanley Cup, and it's going to be the same thing in Toronto. It's one thing to not, he won at, with Medicine Hat in this Western Hockey League. Penn State, he gave it all he had for the year. We knew it was going to be a one and done situation, so it's really hard to put anything out. But in Toronto, a Stanley Cup's going to be a priority. And if he's 26, 27 years old and he's nowhere near a cup, I can't imagine him being around the Maple Leafs much longer.
Right, we will see what happens in Gavin McKenna's career. But until then, this has been another episode of Joe and the Fatman. Then when we record next, we'll talk about Kyle's trip to Buffalo / possibly Toronto, and whatever happens in the recruiting scene over the next week. Until then, take care. This has been Joe and the Fatman.
Good night, Canada.